Hello and welcome to the BloodStream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and BloodStream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board. And I'm reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
You did. You reminded us all. We all are better for it.
Every time, everybody.
Except last time, I had to do that because you were in outer space or wherever you were. We'll get to that later.
Okay.
On today's show, we have Saverio Cimino, who is featured in today's music and expression segment led by James Maple.
Yes.
We have a catch-up conversation. Well, I do. The royal we. Michael Bishop, fellow blood brother, and I, we catch up. You'll hear that at the end of the show today. And we have a segment from CHESS, the Comprehensive Health Education Services, better known to us in the community as CHESS. They have a new SHEmophilia piece that we're going to play some audio from in just a little bit. Amy Board, we've got all that and more on today's episode. Welcome to BloodStream.
As always, thank you for joining us, listeners. As always, all the things. Remember, if you like what you hear and you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast.
Maybe
wherever
you have.
you get your podcast. You can listen to this podcast also on Facebook if you want to.
There's a lot of places that you can do that. We are also on social media
All
outside
of
of Facebook. Yeah, we found all of them, and we're there. So come on and hang out with us there. And listeners, allow me to remind you that the BloodStream podcast is indeed made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right, Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds.
Which is great.
I think so, too.
It's a great stance.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, because it's so much fun. bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the BloodStream podcast, I would just like to say
Thanks Takeda. Yes.
Amy Board, welcome back.
Welcome back.
We heard your voice in the last episode
That's
doing
true.
some great interviewing, but we
Yeah.
missed you. And by we, again, me, Royal We,
Yeah.
I missed you here in studio. It's good to be back with you
Right.
again.
It was last week, right?
Last week, I think so. Yeah. We're in one of those periods. You were somewhere, I was somewhere else.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But now we're here.
I was in Michigan.
How was that?
It was great.
What were you doing?
I went to Michigan for Springfest, which is the Hemophilia of Michigan's education weekend, which was great. We brought the Science Fair Roadshow, and it was wonderful. Wonderful to see the community back. Hello, everyone that we were able to hang out with. And then I took a little retreat. I took a writer's retreat on Lake Michigan, on the west side of Michigan, on Lake Michigan. There's too many Michigans.
Michigan is very highly featured in the first 5 minutes of this episode. And shouts out Michigan. It's an important state. Doesn't get enough love.
Yeah.
Go Pistons.
Anyway, oh gosh, totally, for sure. Go Tigers.
That's more relevant right now, actually.
A little bit. No. But anyway, it was great. It was really good. It was a little cottage. It was very Amy-centric.
Was it, wait, just you?
It was just me.
Oh, at first I thought there were other people, like a workshop thing. No, it's you in a cottage.
It's me in a cottage.
In Michigan.
I did it. I took that retreat time to see if I could do it. It was great. It was 3 weeks too short.
What? We haven't checked in on your writing in a while. You've been working on a book. People know that if they've been listening for a minute.
Yes, I'm working on a book. I'm writing a novel. I'm on my 4th draft, and it's just plugging away. But I actually, when I came back from this retreat, I was like, I think I'm going to take a pause. I just needed to kind of, center myself a little bit. And I woke up this morning and I really missed it. I'm I'm not as centered if I'm not just continuing to plug along, even if it might be slow. So it was kind of a nice little thing this morning to be like, nope, you just do better when you're engaging in that part of your mind and that creative part. So it's going well.
What's the next milestone in your mind?
I think to finish this 4th draft, it feels my 3rd draft was comprehensive, but everything was in the wrong place. All the reveals were in the wrong place. I'm writing a whodunit, and so it was all wrong.
Who did do it?
I'm not telling you.
Shoot. I tried.
You tried. A for effort. But anyway, they were all in the wrong spot. So I did a huge, reorganization type situation, and then there's rewrites in there. And working on that. And then just, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm
That's
glad
the
we checked
process.
in. I was actually wondering about your writing, and this was a very natural way to bring it up
Yeah.
here. So happy to hear about that process. We there hasn't been. I don't think there has been. Maybe I'm wrong. You can let us know. Mailbag at bloodstreammedia.com. I don't think there's been like jaw slack kind of news stories coming out through the community in the last few weeks. I don't think there's anything like of particular, banner worthiness. Except maybe that, and I don't even have my notes up. So this is layman's talk
Off the
here, y'all.
cuff.
Concizumab, which was a antibody, I believe a monoclonal antibody, being investigated by Novo Nordisk, that would be something that could treat hemophilia A or B, I believe, with or without inhibitors. Not the same thing as Hemlibra, but sort of an iteration or a related kind of different product class. Same, I'm not even sure. Again, no notes. But the FDA just requested more information from Novo and did not approve the application to the FDA as it stood, which is notable because Hemlibra's had a huge impact on the community,
right?
Especially for people with hemophilia A who have inhibitors. I've had conversations with folks who fit into that category that have felt spiritual to me in the way their lives have changed, and that's just me talking. And this is for hemophilia A or B, the way it works, with or without inhibitors. You had Dr. Young on to talk about fitusiran, amongst other things, recently. Again, another drug, A or B, with or without inhibitors, but in particular for people with hemophilia B and inhibitors,
right.
Like Michael Bishop. There's a little tease for the segment at the end of the show.
Hey-o.
These therapies are particularly notable.
Right.
So the fact that concizumab has at the very least been delayed because the FDA wasn't satisfied with the application that was submitted means that a treatment option that may have been on the market sooner won't be if at all. I'm not trying to forecast that its demise. It's just we're at a fork in the road kind of moment for it. Felt worth bringing up.
I feel super ignorant that I haven't really heard of this one. And I thought I was in the know.
It's funny because I feel as though there was a period of 18 months, 2.5 years ago, maybe longer, I don't know, where concizumab's name was coming up a lot.
Yeah.
And at least in the circles that I was in or what I was up to, I was hearing about it quite a bit. Like, hey, this may even last in the system longer than Hemlibra. It's A or B. Like, this could be the next thing that Hemlibra helps set the but and maybe still, but I have not heard as much discussion of it in the last year or two. And then it kind of struck me when I just found that headline.
Interesting.
I was like, oh, I didn't even realize they had submitted an application. I missed that. Novo as a company, I think, is generally a little more conservative.
Right.
So other companies may make more of an effort to get PR out there,
right.
PR that gets picked up by other outlets and turns into new. I don't think Novo takes those measures. So, just kind of, I wasn't even necessarily intending to bring this up, but.
No, it's interesting. Maybe we could get somebody on to talk about it, just see a little bit about what it does. I'd be interested to hear what listeners thought about Dr. Guy Young talking about fitusiran. If you guys have any thoughts or comments or whatever, it would just be interesting to hear. And then, of course, kind of the hallmark every year that we as a community get together and, educate, learn what's happening, in terms of our treatment pipelines. The Bleeding Disorder Conference, NHF's big conference, is coming up here in August. So we, of course, will be there. And do they have? I think they do have virtual options, don't they, for some of it? Or not this year.
I don't know if they do.
Is it just in person?
As you say it out loud, I'd be a little surprised, I guess, if it was just in person.
Yeah.
But it may be. I'm not actually sure. Good question. Let's
Interesting.
find that out, and we'll talk about that on the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll report back.
But hemophilia.org, if you do want to look into the Bleeding Disorders Conference, particularly if you're one of the people out there who's been waiting on one of these investigational therapies, would like more information.
Great spot.
Like people like Dr. Young, who are investigators in trials like fitusiran's, are there, present. They're doing presentations. They're available to come up to them afterwards and talk.
Yeah.
So, and it's in D.C. So if you're somebody who, lives in the Northeast and you didn't want to have to make the travel down to Florida or Texas or the West Coast the last few years, that it's been live anyway, it is in D.C. So there's maybe another option for you.
Good call.
All right, let us keep it moving. I mentioned Michael Bishop coming later. We got Saverio is the featured person from the community in our music and expression segment with James. But first, we have our SHEmophilia segment from Chess.
Yes.
Listeners, you've heard us talk along these lines before. Women have remained some of the most marginalized members of the bleeding disorders community, despite reporting similar symptoms to their male counterparts. However, meaningful change is on the horizon, and projects like SHEmophilia, presented by the Chess Foundation, aim to ensure that the voices of women and girls are consistently heard to create substantive change in diagnosis, treatment, and care. In this next segment, we'll be hearing from a woman named Shelley who talks about her life before she was diagnosed with a bleeding disorder. Let's take a listen.
Well, growing up, I used to always have to go to the emergency room. Weekly, my parents would take me at least 2 or 3 times a week, and they would have to cauterize my nose because it would bleed so much. And I remember that they would take this cloth and put it in boiling hot water, and then they would shove it up my nose to stop the bleeding. And after a while, it just became regular. And it's interesting because, you don't really think anything's wrong with you because they don't ask you questions, they don't diagnose you, you just keep going back, and they keep repeating the same thing to make the bleeding stop. And like I said, after Matthew was born, then I realized, wait a second, when I had him, I had a C-section and they couldn't stop me from bleeding. They literally had to turn me upside down to keep the blood inside of me until they could figure out what to give me to stop my bleeding. And at that point, when Matthew was then diagnosed with hemophilia, I thought to myself, you know what? I bet you that I have hemophilia. This all makes sense now. All the bleeding that I had, all the bruising. When the boys, I have 2 sons, and when they were growing up, they were very active in sports. If I had my period during a time that they had a game, I couldn't even go to their games because I would be afraid that I would have an accident and I'd have to come home and change.
What happened when you first visited a healthcare professional?
Well, the interesting thing is that I went to a treatment center in the state that I live in California. I went with a friend of mine. And I had been diagnosed by my son's hematologist prior to this visit. And that hematologist happened to retire from the hospital. So I went back in for an annual visit. And when I went in, they actually looked at me and said to me, we're sorry, but, you don't have a bleeding disorder. And I'm like, wait a second, I was diagnosed with a bleeding disorder. And they were like, well, that doctor no longer works here. And we have to go off what our results show. And our results show that you don't have a bleeding disorder. So after that, I advocated for myself, and through different resources and groups that I belong to, I heard that there was a doctor in the state of Nevada that treated women with bleeding disorders. So I made an appointment, went up for a visit, and got my diagnosis up there.
All right, and there you have Shelley, at least a portion of her story from Chess's SHEmophilia project. Amy and I just listened to that segment for the first time ourselves. Amy, what's your first reaction?
Well, I'm just so pleased that these stories are being told because, unfortunately, I just don't think, this just feels like a very common story in our community, and not to dismiss it, but just to, realize that this is a, systemic thing that, women have just assumed that this is normal for years and years and years. I think it's changing the way that we view women and our symptoms and what the treatment should be. It's being able to trust our medical professionals, to find a medical professional that will listen to us and take us seriously. That is something that is extremely difficult and sometimes takes multiple steps, and it's difficult. I think there's also like a feeling of relief, understanding like, oh, this is why this is why this makes sense. But there is just that maze of the healthcare system, to just navigate through. Anyway, I just listening to her, it was like, yes.
I found myself very quickly frustrated because, as you said, Amy, we hear stories like this all the time.
All the time.
And to not hear them or to hide from them or to get sick of them and I say that respectfully, just like to be like, oh my God, still, like, why? But it doesn't mean they're not true. It doesn't mean it's not happening. This is a systemic historical problem. And unfortunately, like someone going to the ER 2-3 times a week to have their nose cauterized. Are you kidding? I think the part of Shelley's short story there in particular, though, that gets under my skin is a lack of curiosity on the medical providers to, this kid's coming in 2-3 times a week to have their nose cauterized.
Yeah.
No one's curious about this.
Yeah.
No one's investigating beyond the symptom and the crisis of the moment.
Because she's a girl.
How many times have you heard a story of a boy with hemophilia needing his nose cauterized for weeks, 2-3 times a day, weeks, months, years, and it takes 27 years for that boy to be diagnosed? Not to say it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But it does not happen nearly at the same frequency. So we have to drill into the minds of hematologists and primary healthcare providers and dentists and gynecologists that women have bleeding disorders and that they are largely undiagnosed. So I'm glad, to your point, Amy, bringing it to a productive place, that Chess, amongst other organizations, we talked with Ashley Gregory not too long ago about FAIR, this new initiative for women as well. Like, we need all of this. Chess.education is where you can go, listeners, if you want to learn more to support Chess's program for women with bleeding disorders, if you want to look into or attend a Chess event for individuals and families in the inhibitor community, you can simply get in touch with them via chess.education. So www.ches, just one S in chess, CHES.education for more. And thank you to the leadership at Chess for sharing that audio with us.
Yes.
And thank you, Shelley, and to all the women who shared as part of their program for putting your stories out there so that hopefully more women do the same and more providers start to recognize, wow, there's something here that we have to address.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So with that, let's turn our attention now to Saverio, a young person from the bleeding disorders community who participated in our Breaking Through project and also recently met with James Maple for our music and expression segment. That's coming up right now.
I just want to scream and shout. If I could turn back time, I wouldn't go too far.
Hey, BloodStream audience, it's your new best friend, James Maple, here with this week's Music Spotlight. Last week, we heard from Drama About Breaking Through, a filmmaking workshop featuring scenes written and directed by workshop participants telling their story as only they can in the way that came naturally to them. Please check it out. We'll put links to Breaking Through and today's Music Spotlight in the show notes below. You know, as I was watching Breaking Through, I noticed that many of the cast members were musicians, so I made some calls and got in contact with all the right people. And this week's music segment, we are spotlighting a fellow community member, per usual, friend to the podcast, Severe Hemophilia B blood brother, up-and-coming musician, and cast member of Breaking Through, Saverio Cimino. Now, overall, I try my best to come up with a theme to these music segments. What moves me? What words of wisdom can I bestow to you all as we lead into our next discussion on community-based music? After some thinking, this week's music segment is about identity and eclectic expression within that. Moreover, finding that inspiration that comes to you naturally. And I think Saverio describes this really, really well. Let's give it a listen.
The importance of identity as it relates to music means to me that I'm able to implement my own life experiences and my emotions into a, song format. When I was in high school, I used to write a lot of poetry, and then that just evolved into me putting that poetry to music and, to songs.
Now, in my pre-interview with Saverio, he was rather, let's say, conflicted on what music he wanted to present first. He was unsure about how he wanted to showcase his talent, what genre best described him. So we landed on 2 tracks from both of his musical personas. First is Sav Cimino, a more chill pop-influenced iteration, and his second, a rock-centered alias called Ario Mayday, which we'll hear in the lead out to this segment. Now, that led me to think about the complexity of what it means to be alive, specifically alive with a rare disease. We all aren't some singular thing defined by a condition of circumstances. We are frankly diverse. We present and express ourselves very differently and differently at different times at that. And again, that is okay. That is eclectic expression. And who knows, you may feel quite free in doing so.
I do perform a lot of different genres when I create music. I keep my Sav Cimino personality just open to whatever idea flows into my head. And the Ario Mayday has a rock and roll personality. It's a lot easier for me to see Ario Mayday as a personality that I'm able to pour that creative energy into rather than Sav Cimino, which is just who I am. So I find using the single genre not limiting and rather freeing for myself.
Lastly, as we end this segment with Ario Mayday, a.k.a. Sav Cimino, a.k.a. Saverio Cimino, all the same person, his song Midnight Drive, I have a final thought, a challenge even. As we look inward, I want to caution us all not to ignore the outward expressions that exist and can motivate us, other feelings, other notions, other perspectives, and other people who can define who we are. Turn to the community. Turn to others as you express yourself. You'll be surprised at what moves you, what shapes you, what or who helps you eclectically create.
Midnight Drive is a little happier. I got the inspiration for this one listening to my friend Joseph talk about how he likes driving his car really fast, in case you couldn't tell. I had also just been dying to write a song about him because he'd always been there for me whenever I needed him. And it's almost like a tribute in that sense.
Until next time, I'm James Maple, your favorite BloodStream correspondent, reminding you to keep vibing, and no matter where the road takes you, enjoy your own midnight drive. Until next time, bye.
As I quietly slip inside, turn the ignition to the right. Going out for a midnight drive, got my windows down, it's alright. Speeding down the road, going 104, 'cause I wanna hear my engine roar. Going out for a midnight drive, feel the cold wind, and it's alright. Speeding down the road, going 104, forgetting about how my life's so bored.
Thank you, James, for that fantastic segment. And next, we have Patrick's conversation, his catch up with our dear friend Michael Bishop. Looking forward to hearing this.
All right, joining me now, blood brother Michael Bishop, wearing my favorite shirt I've seen all day, all week, all month, all year. I don't know, up for debate. You'll have to be watching on video to see what I'm talking about. Michael Bishop, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, man?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for
Good.
agreeing to do this with me. You know, I was just saying to you off mic, I'm just here to check in with you, to talk to you. It's been a minute since we saw each other, I think last year at HFA. And, you know, we're only able to connect and communicate briefly then. So today, unlike a lot of the interviews that we're doing on BloodStream, there's not an agenda, there's not a headline, there's not a topic. This is two guys with hemophilia just checking in with each other. That's what this is.
I love that. That makes me feel so special. I like. there's no agenda. I'm just cool enough to warrant an interview by itself.
Yeah, I know we can just talk. So let's talk. Give us the state of the union for you. What's kind of going on in your life right now, you know, May 2023?
Well, I'm in kind of a weird place right now. I'm waiting for a knee replacement, which I've known has been coming for a long time. My orthopedic surgeon has been talking about it since I was like 13 or something. Yeah. And I just tried to put that off as long as I could.
Hey, real quick, you mind sharing your diagnosis for those who aren't familiar? I shouldn't take that for granted.
Of course. So I have severe hemophilia B with an anaphylactic allergy to factor IX products. And so kind of just treated like an inhibitor that won't ever go away. I'll just use bypassing agents and have my whole life, which means no prophy, which isn't great for a severe hemophiliac. So it's led to a lot of bleeds and joint damage, and hence the knee replacement. And I took a job last year that required a lot more travel than I was used to, and that kind of pushed the issue of, this knee isn't working anymore.
Travel can really bring a weight-bearing, especially joint issue, right into the forefront.
Yep, totally. And it just got worse and worse chronically. You know, I was not bouncing back after bleeds as much as I had been in the past. And so now I'm just at the point where I had to leave that job because that was not sustainable, and saved up a bit of money from it though. And so now I'm just working on creative stuff and waiting for my orthopedic surgeon and my hematologist to finish arguing about where my knee surgery is going to happen. And then,
so that's
I
what
will
it
do
is.
that.
It's a matter of the location at this point.
It is, yeah, because the hematologist is like, I really want him here. He's a complicated case, and the surgeon's like, I want him at my place because I got all my people there. He's a complicated case, and so they're going back and forth right now, and I'm waiting for that resolution, which I think will happen within the next month or so.
Okay, all right. And then if all goes according to that plan, when do you think you're getting that surgery?
Probably in August. I think it'll be like after they decide. That's kind of the final piece of the puzzle that needs to be laid into place, and then hoping to turn it around really quickly. And thankfully my lease was up as well when I was deciding that job wasn't going to work out. And so I moved back in with my mother, and I'm helping her with everything she's got going on now. And so at least I'm in like a really good place to have a surgery like that and to take time to recover. And so I feel good about that, at least.
You know, as you're talking that through, it reminds me that this idea of transitions doesn't go away when we become a young adult or get a first job. You know, maybe it's just me. I'm definitely guilty of thinking about transitions with regard to hemophilia anyway, and I guess kind of in life in general, as being like a process that sort of ends once you're situated in young adulthood. But in fact, no, as long as you're alive, you're going to have transitions every so many weeks, months, years. It's just part of life, right?
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes because those transitions might not look like you wanted them to. You know, moving back in with folks could feel like a huge step back. And I was like,
I've been there.
You know, I went through all of those nice milestones throughout my 20s, and you know, the salary was going up, the apartments got nicer, that kind of stuff, and so anything that wasn't that very clear next evolution of that just felt a little, I don't, you know, this feels like a misstep, or like I'm going backwards. But but thankfully I've talked to some friends about it and feel really good about that. But you're absolutely right, those transitions can be even harder in that way, and sometimes they're difficult to accept. But in hemophilia, you're always making concessions, you know, always feeling like you're transitioning from bleed to being healthy, or from abandoning this activity for another one or something. And so I think we're pretty used to it.
Now, from a recovery from surgery standpoint, and especially given, you know, your case in particular, have you lined up, will your mom be a key part of that team? What are you anticipating in terms of recovery and support system?
Yeah, I think she definitely will be. And unfortunately, my orthopedic surgeon is very confident about it, but of course he is, you know, so I'm taking that with a grain of salt, because I dislocated my kneecap when I was 9 and had to have a patella realignment surgery during that time. And obviously that caused a lot of bleeding issues, and that was a nightmare. And so I haven't been able to bend or straighten my knee fully ever since then. And I'm 30 now. And so it's been quite a while. And I was 5'2" when that happened, and I'm 6'1" now. And so I know all those muscles have kind of developed in an interesting way. And I don't know exactly what recovery is going to look like until it happens.
Yeah.
Which is why I put off the surgery for so long. I was like, it's just, there's so much up in the air. I wasn't going to do it until I needed to do it. And it just feels like, you know, I wake up every day and I'm like, all right, just throw me in there. Just give me a new knee. We'll see what happens.
Listeners have heard me talk about my ankle situation, and for the last year and a half, you know, exploring different interventions and thinking, am I getting a replacement, a fusion, a debridement, and a bone spur removal, and steroid shots, but that's not doing the whole thing. And so, yeah, regular listeners to this have been hearing me kind of speak similarly about delaying it until it's become clear that, you know, for me, it became clear that something had to give at the end of 2021, something had to change. And so I started this path, and I'm still just trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to do now? What's the least invasive, most pound for pound, bang for my buck option in front of me next? Let's try that. How's that going? You know, and just try to, but like you said, that's just part of our life, right? That's just part of what it means to live with this thing effectively, is having to sort through these kinds of transitions in physical health and surgeries and stuff like that. That's part of it.
Yeah, totally. And I've been focusing more on the mind-body connection too. And I started therapy for the first time in my life about 6 months ago. And, you know, after I left my last job and knew I was going to take some time to just be with myself and work on creative things and do what I wanted to do, I thought, okay, going to get the body right. I feel like I'm in a good position for that surgery, but also take this time and be able to make therapy appointments any time of day I want to, or whatever, and really, really focus on that. And that's also been helping me cope through this transition in particular, but also just kind of in general as someone who experiences a lot of that as someone with hemophilia.
For sure. That's cool to hear. Is there a top takeaway so far from your first, say, 6 months in therapy?
I've been working through a lot of like familial stuff, which I find to be an interesting connection as far as genetics. Hemophilia being a genetic disorder, like genetics really pop out to me as a topic of conversation, whether that's like inherited traits, but also characteristics and you know, just my thinking around things or a proclivity for addiction or whatever it is. Like I've kind of been really focusing on, I didn't have a good relationship with my father, and so I kind of ignored our connection. And in the last 6 months, I've been exploring that, even though it's without him because he's passed. But I've been exploring that more and more, and it's helping me feel a little more rooted, I guess. I just never felt like the history of my family was worth looking back on, because he certainly didn't either, and so he never talked about his family. But as I think about, like I said, our inherited characteristics, and also this big thing, the biggest part of my life, hemophilia, is also an inherited thing. That's really been something I've been exploring recently in therapy.
I have also found, since having a kid, I've had the experience I think a lot of people have at different stages of life, where they're like, oh, I'm becoming my parent. You know, there's ways in which,
sure.
And when, you know, as far as my dad goes in parenting, there are definitely ways in which I do not want to be repeating the same steps, but I see myself doing things in those lanes and going like, okay, this is something to pay attention to. Like, this is a force stronger than my willpower. This is something historic. This is something genetic. This is something ingrained in me from a young age. This is something powerful that I have to contend with. I can't just pretend it doesn't exist. So I hear everything you're saying, and it's for me, since having Vivian, compounded, I guess.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I saw that in my father growing up, because I could tell that he was reflecting on the way his father treated him, and how that all informed his parenting. And like, he made mistakes, but made sure they certainly weren't the same mistakes his father made. And so that's very interesting to hear from a father's perspective.
When did your father pass?
He passed in 2018. Yeah, January of 2018.
Was it sudden?
It was sudden, yes. But he didn't go to the doctor or anything. So if it was, I think the cause of death was ruled to be alcoholic cardiomyopathy. He was a very heavy drinker, and like I said, did not go to the doctor. And he was a big do not resuscitate, do not intubate, and just had a I don't think it was a heart attack, but some fancy doctor word for an episode in his heart, and passed away that way. So it was very sudden. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, man. And I'm glad that you're in a space where you can reflect on that, and with a professional, kind of sift through what you need to as it relates to your relationship to your dad, your relationship to yourself now, and just life in general. So huge proponent and fan of therapy and things that make our mental health stronger, and appreciate hearing what you're doing right now. That's cool. That's very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've always been a huge proponent of therapy. I've known it was wonderful, but just never took the steps to actually go consistently myself. And I gotta say, if you're one of those people who like believes in it, but doesn't feel like you're ready to go all the time, just try to find a therapist you like, and you can do it monthly or over Zoom or whatever. But it's everyone, I think, could be helped by having a nice therapist to talk to.
Now, what are you doing in the creative world? You've mentioned a couple of times you've had opportunities now to spend some more time with your creative side. What's going on there?
Yeah, I'm doing a couple things. The surgery, admittedly, and like figuring myself out has kind of stifled the motivation for a little while, but I'm back at it now. I have a podcast with my ex-girlfriend that I do every week that I very much love doing, called My Ex and I. And that's just kind of a comedy slice of life podcast, because my ex-girlfriend is my best friend, which is a little abnormal, and we wanted to capture that relationship. Doing a bit of writing though, and illustrating. I do like little diary comics and things like that, and making some music, and yeah, doing all the things I learned to do as a kid when I couldn't walk, and just seeing if I can get a project out of one of them.
That's cool. Something comes to mind, but I don't know that I know what a diary comic is. What is a diary comic?
So it's basically just like your standard comic book, but it's autobiographical, and it's kind of meant to be little slices of life that are as often mundane as they are profound, and you're just trying to capture a little bit of everything as you're moving through it. The goal, I think, typically with a diary comic is to do it every day and just see where it goes, and see what you find in that when you make yourself sit down and write something every day and illustrate something every day. And so I'm hoping at the end of it to have like a little zine or a little, a little graphic novel of these diary comics for the past year or so.
All right. Well, if you get to that stage, I want one.
Okay. Yeah, of course. You got it. You got it.
Maybe as a last topic for us to talk about, we had Dr. Young on recently last month to talk about fitusiran, because it is something that is coming soon, and it is a non-factor replacement therapy, but unlike those, or I guess that, which is currently available with emicizumab and putting gene therapy in a different category, fitusiran's unique, A or B, with or without inhibitors. So Dr. Young talked with us about the science and the medical and the clinical and the stuff. But as somebody with hemophilia B who has had an immunological response and does not respond to traditional factor replacement therapy, you're one of the people, when I think about fitusiran, just speaking like really openly, that come to mind from my life, who I'm like, yeah, this dude, like this is one of the people that this drug is being made for. This is me talking. What's your take? Do you feel that way? Are you excited by what might be coming? Like, we haven't actually talked about this. I've just projected onto you what you might be thinking about. So let me hear from you. What are you thinking about when it comes to fitusiran?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that has been a drug that I've followed for a really long time in its clinical trial phases, and have been very excited about for, I guess, years at this point. I think you're right. It is like exactly for me. It is. I think the drug more than anything that I've kind of held out hope for a little bit. And so I'm very excited. I tried to get on some clinical trials, but I believe the allergy was an issue, and I also technically have factor V Leiden, which makes you prone to clotting.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think they didn't want me in the studies for that reason, of course. But yeah, it's a drug that I know another hemophiliac who has my exact diagnosis, who did get on the clinical trial, and it radically changed his life. He has done amazingly on it, and for quite a while now. And so it is, I'm very, very, very excited. I think, new science always excites me, but throughout my whole life, the new hemophilia sciences have never particularly been relevant to me.
Sure.
And so this one is like a nice change of pace in that regard. And I'm excited to try it out as soon as I can.
Well, let's make a commitment here to check back in maybe sometime this fall. Especially if the surgery goes ahead, maybe we can check in with you while you're recuperating and laid up a little bit. If the mic is close enough, you can just pull it over to your chair.
Yeah.
We'll see how it's going, dip in there. And there might be more to talk about with regard to wherever fitusiran is and its trajectory by that point, or maybe there'll be something else on the treatment or care landscape for us to talk about then. So if we don't talk before that, at least on mic, Michael, let's make a tentative plan to check back in this fall and see how you're doing.
That sounds really good. And I might have a graphic novel to sell. So any airtime I can get, I would appreciate.
Yeah, let's talk about that. In the meantime, my ex and I will have a link in the program notes. You can go hear Michael and his ex talk to each other in a podcast that they put into the world publicly.
Publicly, yeah. An hour a week.
And it's as raw as it sounds. So
Yes.
go listen and enjoy. And Michael, man, I appreciate your time. Good to see you. Thanks for talking with me for a bit.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks as well to Saverio, James, Shelley, Chess, and the Shemophilia contributors. Thanks to the production support here at BloodStream Media Believe Limited. Amy, thank you. I mean, we couldn't do this
Thanks.
without you.
Right back at you.
No episode of the podcast would be possible either without, of course, our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Thanks, Takeda. Visit bleedingdisorders.com to learn more. Amy, BloodStream will be back again on June 9th. We're going into the month of June
I
because that's how months
know.
work. But still, what can listeners expect to hear on June 9th?
We have a great interview. James actually did an interview with an organization called Sing Me a Story. And this organization works with songwriters to take the stories that are written by children who are affected by rare and chronic diseases to help bring their stories to life through song. And it is a cool organization, very much up James's alley. And it's cool. So maybe some of you listeners will get some inklings of maybe how to utilize them a little bit, but they're really cool.
So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to BloodStream so you can get that episode and all episodes the moment they go live. Of course, share these episodes, tell your friends, tell everybody you know. Spread the word about BloodStream. And if you want to learn more about casting or storytelling opportunities that BloodStream and Believe Limited have to offer, email us mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. With that, that is all for this episode. I'm your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm your other host, Amy Board.
And until next time, June 9th, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.